See, landing on the moon is always a challenge. It has been the challenge from the past also, even while the US was sending their astronauts. But there was an astronaut to control the landing process at that time. The human was in the loop. But today now we are doing with a computer, with an algorithm, which is the brain of the system. And this algorithm has to foresee what all can happen. And it has possibility of doing things only what we have envisioned for it to do. It cannot do anything different. Unlike a human being who can make a new design or new approach right there when he faced some challenges. And actually it happened in earlier moon missions. Human being was deciding certain things which a computer couldn't do at that time. Now coming back to the Chandrayaan-2, see, we create scenarios of landing. Scenarios can be hundreds of scenarios of the initial conditions variations, the position where we land, whether we should exactly land, or I take a decision that for me landing is important than the location. Landing on a stone or a crater is more important than falling at very high velocity and crashing. These decisions a computer cannot take. So what we now looked at is create scenarios of wider dispersions and possibilities of failure of various kinds, and look at how still the craft will land softly. Build all of that intelligence into the computer. This is precisely we did.
So you would say that the significant difference is the way the computer essentially operates, gauges what is the need of the hour at that point, especially when you're closer to the landing, which of course becomes the difficulty with the velocity, all that put together. Are we also looking at certain other significant changes? For instance, as far as the rocket was concerned, that was considered to be the heaviest rocket. What are the other aspects that would you say is perhaps the first of its kind as far as Chandrayaan-3 is concerned?
See, when I said that, it was in such a brief to say the essence of that change. But to implement that particular goal of handling possible variations of larger extent, it means making certain changes in the hardware. There were many changes in the hardware to accomplish that. One of them is that we were landing with a single engine last time. Now we are going to land with 2 engines this time. Because the mass of the rover is higher and we cannot handle with single engine. Second is we are having more fuel on board to handle dispersions of wider extent. So we have to load more fuel, which calls for change in the hardware design, tank design, everything we have modified. Third, we have more power generation on board. Now if you don't face the sun after landing, and it should not go, switch off in short time. So we were not in a position to do any further experiments. That is also a failure. Even after soft landing, things need not work. So how do we foresee how the possibilities there? Then we looked at how sensors can mislead you. There are certain sensors to measure position, height, speed, relative to the moon, etc. And we try to put additional instruments to handle failures of multiple sensors. Then we have additional images that are obtained from the Chandrayaan-2 orbiter loaded onto the lander so as to handle the location more effectively. So once you get the onboard stored image, which is from the Chandrayaan-2, and the actual image, they will compare and see I am right there, and we can make a landing more precisely. Finally, we expanded the landing zone to a much larger area so that in case we find any deviations, it can still land safely rather than land at the exact location. So we widened the possibility of landing to a greater area. So, and algorithm, software is also given a lot of freedom to make those changes and approaches. And finally, with all of this, we did large number of testing and simulations to prove that our approaches, our algorithms, our sensors, our failure modes are validated before the actual launch. So this is fundamentally the converting the goal to the action.
As I understand, Dr. Somanath, if this goes the way it has been planned, India becomes the 4th country to land its spacecraft on the surface of the moon. Now, we've seen lunar explorations done by other countries. Russia has done it, China has done it, United States of America has done it. As I understand, the difference here is where it is landing, closer to the South Pole. Challenges are far more higher. Was there a moment at that when you were planning this entire mission, a discussion whether at all we should be doing that, because that happens to be the most difficult area? The equatorial region, almost several countries have done it. Scientific objectives have met with. The scientific objective as far as closer to south of the South Pole is concerned, that has not been met with. So how are you basically looking at that aspect in terms of the decision making for the landing purpose?
See, if you simply decide that my goal is only to soft land as the primary goal, I can very well do it at the equator. But we never wanted like that. We wanted a scientific goal to be integral part of this mission.
Right.
Otherwise, it doesn't, it doesn't convey the intent of the whole going to moon. Because many people have already gone to the equatorial point and well surveyed these areas, and data is already there. But on the southern pole, there are new findings which is coming out of the Chandrayaan-1 and Chandrayaan-2, the potential to find water or its creation and possible mineral wealth or etc. at a higher level than that is available in the equator. Due to the activity of the sun, many things would have vanished from the equatorial zones. So a scientific objective drove us to put it at 70 degrees of the south pole, which is very important. Of course, landing point of view and life point of view, equator would have been better. But it is better to take that chance of going to south pole to find something new, which is important.
As I understand, it's an exploratory mission. So of course there cannot be anything definitive about what are you really looking at. But in terms of possibilities, what is it that you are really looking at apart from what Chandrayaan-1 has already met, the objectives that Chandrayaan-1 had, the objectives that Chandrayaan-2 had? What is it that Chandrayaan-2 is looking at in terms of possibilities? I understand nothing can be definitive about it.
Precisely. When we went send our instruments in Chandrayaan-1 on board, we were not hoping that there is water on the moon.
Right.
Okay, but many people have gone before and found, took samples and evaluated, but nobody told about the hydroxyl molecule presence. Of course, there were some theories, but our instruments and two of the such instruments actually found proof of it, and nobody was initially able to believe it is there. So unexpected is always expected in a mission like this, but we can only talk about the current instruments and what exactly it is going to do.
Okay.
So we are actually trying to find out the mineralogy of the moon surface. We are trying to find out its thermophysical characteristics of the moon surface. We are also looking at the close atmosphere of the moon surface. These are the essentially three zones of interest. So these zones of interest will definitely give some clue on various things. Genesis of the moon, how it came about, what it is actually constructed out of. There are many theories of creation of moon, where from it came, whether these things are valid. The thermophysical properties are important for the reflectivity and other characteristics of the moon, and also how its atmosphere is not resident there, why it is actually being lost faster. So many things of generation of moons and celestial bodies, the fundamental theories will get augmented by the knowledge of this. So we are hoping basic stuff of like this nature, and maybe we may find a gold mine there after going there.
We are all looking, I think so just with you, the entire nation may be looking forward to some sort of a gold mine that is there. But